So, thank you.
Who else would like to be heard on this application? Okay, well, we're not closing the hearing, and we will receive further input. But I told you what I thought. I guess we should just, as a preliminary matter, recognize that the zoning requires these various plans. In number 4, an application for a special permit shall include the following plans. The plan shall be prepared in a form suitable for recording, and each plan, rule, or specification shall be specifically approved and shall be enforceable as part of the special permit. And as I say, we've got plans listed A through S. And the application runs along generally the same lines. So my suggestion is that we look at some of these plans and see whether or not we think that they are adequate, and whether or not if they were adopted as written, they would provide for effective and convenient enforcement. So, the first plan is the existing conditions plan, and I think that we've seen the existing conditions plan. What do we think about it? Do we have the existing condition plan of both sites in this?
I don't believe we do.
Yeah, here,
I'm sorry, we do,
Yeah.
yes.
here it is. It's probably should be entitled existing conditions.
We should probably confirm that it's the existing conditions.
On the second site, you mean?
Is this the is plan of their nursery for nursery layout existing conditions or proposed conditions?
The 217 to 237 Hillside Street.
It's really essentially both. It is essentially existing condition. It's not proposed to be changed. Well, it is existing, although there is a proposed for further infill of some buffering trees.
So those
Those have
trees
not
and
been
greens
installed.
are proposed.
Those
Okay,
have not been installed.
thank you.
Okay, this is in a double A area, and so you can see there is a house on this, and it would, if it were not used does the special permit, the 87 special permit, pick this one up?
No, because it was purchased after that. The ZBA ruled in, I believe, '09 that it is exempt because it has over 2 acres.
So this is, okay, so this is not covered by the 87 permit. Okay, so those are the two existing conditions plans. They probably are adequate. Existing site typography, building structures, utility services. Are the utility services in there?
They are.
They are? Okay. Everything,
It looked like it was checked to me.
okay.
Yep.
The deeds, copies of the deeds we've got. I actually haven't read them, but we do have them. And we should read them over just to see whether or not they raise
I'll
any.
just change the leases to include Josh and my name.
What?
The leases should be updated, because currently it's leased to Thayer Nursery. So I'll change that so it says it's leased to Maggie and Josh.
Well, that would be just a new,
That's
a lease amendment.
Yeah. Do we really have to do that if we each own it?
What?
If we already own them,
Well, no, I understand that but, given the fact that if a special permit were to be issued, it would probably be litigated. We want to make sure that i's are dotted and t's are crossed. And I mean, the town, if it gets litigated, we want it to be as good a special permit as possible, so that the court will say, this looks like a good special permit, dismiss. Not permit, but the case. But Mr. Dunn, do you have a question?
I just, and I'm sorry if you said this, is the meeting, is it closed?
No.
So
This is, if you come up, if you have a comment on these particular things, you should come up and make them. Just raise your hand and say, I've got a
and
comment.
I'm sorry to interrupt the sort of the deliberative process here, but
What we're doing is we're looking at these things and seeing if we think that we're not voting on whether or not these are adequate. We're discussing whether or not they seem to be adequate.
my concern is that it's just that there's going to be supplemental information that's going to be provided.
Then
They
obviously,
would have an opportunity.
then obviously it
All right,
should be,
that's the only thing I
it should be considered.
Hearing is
It
open.
needs to be, you need to be able to comment on it. And in fact, what's here, I mean, when you know how we're going about doing this, which is looking at the zoning and looking at the response, if people have input or comments, they should raise their hands and we'll hear them.
Is one of our staff members, Tim or Emily, are you guys keeping a list of items where we come through and say, okay, we still need this? So for example, the lease amendment, so that everybody has a clear understanding at the end? Awesome.
I think that's, so we'll, okay.
See.
The wetlands delineation plan, we're told that there are no wetlands on any of these sites. And that, that is
Page 6. Yeah.
page 4?
Page 6.
3?
Page 6.
It's on page 6?
Yep.
Shouldn't be on page 6. Be on page,
Of their application, it's page 6.
okay. Yeah,
course
they
they-
say that, that's what they say. Okay, here, I'm sorry, I was that is right where it should be. The drainage plan, we are, as soon as this rain ends, you're going to get out there and take a look.
Yes. Just a quick comment on that. We do know that some changes were made, particularly with the drainage swale. The leach pits have not been installed. That they need to be done. We need to look at and evaluate the change that occurred with the creation of the ditch along the property and how to address drainage issues there. We're looking at the notion of piping from that to this detention area over here, creating additional berm, but we will modify the drainage plan once the snows have gone and the engineers can get back out there hopefully in the next week or two. And so hopefully by the 9th, we'll have a revised plan to share with abutters and to share with the board.
Can I just suggest, given that this may be the start of a lot of spring rains, that if there's something that can be done immediately to clear out any sort of damming or blockage, that be done. So, I'm not saying that everything has to be installed immediately, but there should be some sort of remediation for the partial
I think that's a good idea.
installation.
Out
Yeah.
and do something over here to protect anything from flowing off the
Right.
site, and probably think about getting ready to install the leach pit so that there's somewhere for this water to drain to, and to drain into the ground.
All right, the landscape plan is a somewhat difficult one because I thought we did the drainage.
Sorry, I thought we were still doing the wetlands. Never mind. Drainage, yes.
The landscape plan has to have and this is actually, this Sam Lepore's comments come into focus under the landscape plan. And the question as I see it is, have they done a good job of providing for a efficient, convenient operations area which will impact the neighbors as little as possible.
Was it the parking plan or the landscaping plan, or both? I guess it's both.
I think it ends up being both.
There's overlap.
Yeah, okay.
There's overlap. Which was the other plan you were talking about?
The parking
The parking
and
plan.
operations for that matter,
And operations, exactly.
really
They,
all together.
the,
I think part of her concern is her side, her shared lot line being treated with the same care as the back lot line.
right, well, the current operations area is basically next to Messrs. Joe Henning and Rowe.
Right.
And this would bring it and put it in front of the old barn, but basically on the Lepore lot line. And they are suggesting that a 8-foot fence, I believe it's an 8-foot fence, with sound attenuating material next. And Mike, we're going to at some point try and determine whether the sound attenuating material is the best possible, what they're proposing, if we can. But if a fence can be erected with sound attenuating material, would it be reasonably likely that we haven't simply shifted a nuisance from up near the Parkwood Drive area down to next to the Lepore residence? And I think she suggested that she saw no reason why the fence she got should be any less than the fence that was being provided on the other
Right.
lot line, and I think that certainly that makes some sense. I don't know that there's any explanation as to why there is a difference.
Her 8-foot fence, that's the wrong terminology, I'm sorry. The 8-foot fence that's going to be along her lot line will be on top of a 1-foot berm. So that'll be a total height of 9 feet.
Yeah.
But that's still lower than the total height of fence and berm along the back, as I understand. I'm looking for the numbers now.
Yeah, the problem with the fence along
Yeah.
the back, it sits lower,
Right.
so that's why the fence needed to be taller.
So there's a
Because they-
berm along the back as well? Is the fence on top of that's what I wasn't quite sure. The fence is on top of a berm?
So the
Okay.
property goes at a slope,
Okay.
and so they're on that's the lowest side. So for them to have an efficient block, 10-foot fence would be better than an 8-foot fence. I don't think an 8-foot fence would give them the protection they need.
So is there any reason not to have a 10-foot fence along the other property line?
Our main concern is the wind factor. As you know, according to Forbes magazine, Milton is the windiest city in the country. We have an average wind of 14 miles per hour. The gusts can get up to 60 miles per hour, according to the Blue Hills Observatory. Our fear is if you do a 10-foot fence and then you attach the sound mat to it, you're essentially creating a sail, which jeopardizes the integrity of the fence. So if you think a 10-foot fence is a better option, then we propose maybe not do the sound barrier. I think that a 10-foot fence with sound barrier is going to be an extremely challenging maintenance issue for us. Even after this winter, if you drive around Milton, you can see all the fences that are on the ground.
Then the second question would be, how would a 2-foot berm with the 8-foot fence affect the drainage along that area? If you brought that 1-foot berm up to a 2-foot berm and then put the 8-foot fence along it, does it make an effective difference to the drainage? Does it still attract the wind? I mean, if you can't increase the height of the fence, can you increase the height of the berm, basically?
The problem is, and again, I'm not an engineer, but
I was
as
gonna
I
say, yeah.
understand it, when you increase the berm, then the fence posts are actually in an elevated berm, so the stability of the posts
Okay.
are jeopardized. So if you wanted to do a 10-foot fence, you would want your posts being in solid ground.
No, it would be an 8-foot
So an
fence, yeah.
8-foot fence on a, that I'd have to check with the fence installers. I don't know,
Could you get a letter from the fence installers on these points? That would be
Yeah.
helpful.
yeah. We did have a letter.
We've got
sorry,
3
okay.
people who want to be heard on this, so we'll hear you all. We're not going to, the fence is as important an issue as anything, because it is, as I understand it, supposed to do the major job of sound mitigation.
So people hire us to do noise reduction in their landscape, and from there are 4 kind of aspects that go into noise reduction, and it's a systems approach, not just a one single product approach. And so having a fence will actually deflect and reflect sound. So having a fence there will actually bring the noise back to us. So that's one aspect. You also want to have vegetation there to absorb any noise. And so part of our plan is planting on both sides of the fence, planting on our side of the fence. So it actually, the arborvitae's planted on our side will absorb some of the sound before it gets to the fence, where it might reflect it back at us. And then on her side of the fence, wherever she wants it, in between her, wherever Pam would like it, we would site some Norway spruces. So it doesn't necessarily have to be along the property line. If she wants it closer to her house, that's okay with us too.
So then I think your landscape plan is only showing one row of the plants.
I think, though, in the narrative, it actually describes the second row.
Right, but the
So
plan
the
becomes
plan-
part of the
okay.
special permit if granted, so we need to,
All right,
Add that.
make a note of that. Now, let's get,
Before they come up, I just have two more questions on the
Okay.
fence issue. One is, why does the fence stop? I've never understood that. And I don't know if that may be fine with the abutter, so it's just a question. And the second is, I brought it up last night, I still don't entirely see the purpose of this driveway behind the wood barn. And if the driveway can be done away with and worked around, I think there was a request from the abutter of moving the fence over towards the wood barn and wondering if, and away from her setback. It seems to me like the driveway is the only thing really preventing that, so I'd be interested in hearing a comment on that.
We actually did consider that today, and we considered it sort of, we don't have anything on plan, but concept would be that we would bring additional plantings on this side of the fence, running parallel or a line down off of the corner of the barn, leaving sort of an opening between this edge of the bin so that there's some ability to get back there, but they don't need to do much, if anything, back there. We just need to leave access to the area in the rear, but it would be sort of planted and then masked, so there would be no obvious reason to go by, and there's no reason for trucks to come through here at all. When the diesel is delivered to the site, the truck actually backs in, the hose runs in this way, and their own trucks can back in, be filled, and everything comes back out. So this area can be modified, it can be retreated. The question is, the details of that, but certainly bringing forward to approximately almost to 40 feet. I mean, it's this edge of line here, this corner is slightly closer to the property line than this corner. That's at 37 feet, so somewhere between 37 and 40 is where the additional sort of planted buffer
Okay,
would be.
I think that's a nice addition. And then just why does the fence stop? And again, I've
Why does the fence stop here?
Right.
Really because it's taking beyond here, it's just buffering any noise that's going, and visual of anything that's going from this operation in that direction. It's intended to mask everything along that line.
And really, one of the, it really comes down to aesthetics as well. Our neighborhood doesn't have a lot of fences, and we're trying to delineate where the activities of the landscaping activities shall occur, so we're kind of concentrating in that area and we're not anticipating a lot of landscaping activities occurring past that fence. And as,
Actually, I have one comment, Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street.
Why don't you come up to the table and speak into the microphone?
Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street. And just to address Brian's concern there, from the end point of the fence there, it transitions into a 10,000 square foot grow out area of 6 to 12 foot, 14 foot spruce trees in a layered fashion. So that really, it aesthetically as well as functionality would be served by the planting of that grow out area.
And the fence stops in line with the building, so everything is sort of lines up to something, so there's not irregular stop and start points on the
Yeah, just
property.
from a design perspective, it's always nice to make correlations between architecture and rigid points on your property. And it just made sense from an architectural standpoint to make that the endpoint and then transition into the evergreens. And we can make it a point to stagger the evergreens with the larger ones towards the property line and step it down. That's not a problem whatsoever.
Do we have a elevation or a picture of the fence itself and how it's going to look from?
It is in your book, that's a 8-foot fence that was erected at the site walk, and that was not sitting on a 1-foot berm.
Most of the way back.
Almost at the back?
Yeah.
And it was designed because we have an existing fence on the other property.
Oh, that one, okay, yeah.
So if you want to get a feel for a height of a fence, there's a 8-foot marker in the corner there. That gives you, that's a indicator of an 8. It starts, a 6-foot fence is the bottom stripe, 8 foot and 10 foot's at the top. So 8 foot is the height of the ceiling here, 10 feet cannot fit in a room.
Are you going to use pressure-treated wood on this?
Yes.
And how deep are those posts?
Minimum 3 feet in concrete.
In concrete?
Yes, every post.
And they're pressure-treated what?
Pressure treated, all the 6 by 6.
6 foot, yeah.
Oh, the posts themselves are 6 by 6, yeah.
The boards are 1 by 6 and that cross member is what?
It's an 8-foot section. So each panel is 8 feet.
Yeah, 2 by,
Are those 2 by 4s?
no, I think they were 2 by 6s to tell you the truth.
Well, we'd like to know a little bit
We-
about
Well,
the
that
fence.
is in
We have the construction details in the package.
In this package.
Yes.
It doesn't go all.
2 by 4s is the cross member.
I just want to make sure it goes past the material. Oh, that's fine. Okay.
No, we don't have that. It's an 8-foot pressure treated with 6 by 6 posts placed 8 feet apart.
Okay, well, whereabouts is it?
Yeah.
It's on page 7 of the narrative.
I think maybe it's a setback.
And my concern really is of a 12-foot fence is, as I drove around Milton and I observed fences, we don't have any 12-foot fences in any residential or even commercial sites. So I was down at the fruit center, and their fence is only 8 feet tall, and they only have a 6-foot setback. So the fruit center, in my opinion, is located in it is located in a residential area, and it's probably the busiest and most congested store that we have, and they only have an 8-foot fence with a 6-foot setback. And I honestly just don't think a 12-foot fence is really a precedent that you want to be setting. I just don't think Milton is a 12-foot
Well, we were
fence
talking
community.
10 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even 10. 10 is
10,
excessive.
I understand, but
10
you've
is
got 10
excessive.
feet in one place and 8 feet in the other, but we've got, we'll see what the neighbor has to say about this. They've waited patiently to offer some comments. Is it time? We can make these requirements for the fence a little more specific. The cross member is a matter of some concern to me.
You have a letter that got sent to you this morning. I think it actually was yesterday. It says, this is from Reliable Fence and Supply. And it goes, Mr. Oldfield, the proposed perimeter fence is to be constructed of pressure-treated pine with 6x6 posts set in 48 by 18-inch concrete footings, with two 2x6 horizontal boards and 1 1/4 by 6-inch vertical planking. The perimeter fence is to be installed in a 1-foot earthen berm. Due to the excessive winds in Milton, this fence will hold up extremely well and should deflect sound from the neighbors. If the perimeter fence was to be elevated to 12 feet, this could possibly cause failure due to extreme winds and would also be an eyesore for the neighbors. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, James Beto, project manager.
So what's shown has actually 3 cross members. But otherwise, why don't you print that out and give it to Tim, and we'll make that, he'll distribute it. But he's talking about a 10-foot fence there?
Yes.
Okay.
Talking about 8.
8.
No,
No?
wait a minute. I was moving it over to you. Proposed fence,
Distribute that.
I don't see.
We don't have.
just says perimeter fence.
All right. Well, we're going to hear from other people. We're not going to decide anything about the fence without hearing from the people who might be impacted by the fence, or actually might be mitigated by the fence. So,
Are we gonna do that now?
what?
Are we gonna do that now? or are
We're
we
going
gonna
to do that right now. Yes.
Good evening, Pamela Pori, 44 Forest Street. I just have a question on the whole land care yard location. Is there any way to move that away from me, like they did on the easterly side of the property?
Well,
Why-
it has
why-
been moved, it's been moved a little bit by what he's suggesting there, by the elimination of that roadway.
But I have the bulk of the entire commercial activity next to my property. They're proposing an 8-foot fence. 18-wheel trucks are 12.5 feet high. They're going to be backing into those bins, the storage bins, gravel, cobblestones, mulch. They're going to be backing in there. And what good is an 8-foot fence going to do for the visual effect of that? And just common sense to me as far as the wind impact, if you plant trees on both sides of a fence, yeah, if you have a fence in the middle of a field with nothing protecting it, it's going to blow over. So planting trees on both sides, to me, would mitigate the force of the wind. I mean, I think that's common sense. But I just don't think it's fair for them to move that from the back of the property next to me. When next to the barn, there's plenty of space to move this activity. I just don't understand how we're even talking about this.
Next to the barn and back of the garden shop.
The main barn on the
Next to which barn?
The main barn.
The wood barn?
The showcase barn, no, the showcase barn right
Okay, the
here.
showcase barn back of the house.
Yes.
And where would you put it?
This could all be moved right here, away from any abutter.
Oh, into the area that they have
Just plantings.
the planting. Well, we would want to hear from the neighbors about that.
I mean, because if you look at the plantings in the back of the property, all this buffer, I don't know how deep this is. Do we have any idea how deep?
To where?
This whole area here, this is all plantings.
112
This-
feet.
this depth.
112-ish.
112 to the back of the lab house, so it's
So it's about
probably
100 feet.
Okay.
So I'm getting a whole 15 feet of trees. I don't understand how that.
Well, I think we tried to increase it to 40 tonight. I'm not saying it's 100, but we
Well,
did try to get it to
Again, the fence is
40.
back 30 feet.
Mhm.
I've got the fence right on the property line.
Well, the fence is 15 feet, but it's not 30 feet.
But
on our property.
it should be, I should have as much buffer here as they have here, in all fairness. And getting back to the fruit center, I don't believe they allow 18-wheel trucks into the fruit center. I think they have to transport smaller shipments. They don't allow 18-wheel trucks. So I have all the 18-wheel, not just the firewood, but all of the mulch delivery, the stone delivery, and the reloading and loading and back and forth. It's all along my property. That's just not fair.
Well, the neighbors on Hillside Street and Forest Street would be closer, their houses would be closer to where you're proposing to put the yard than where your house is.
But the land next to me is a separate lot than my house, and I've explained
Well,
before.
We're just talking
that-
fairness.
Well, I had plans of building a house right there next to this fence, because that's the only place it perks. I've been paying taxes on that for 32 years as a buildable lot. My kids are grown, that was my plan, that was my dream, and my house would be right next to this whole activity.
So what do people think? I mean, it seems to me that it seems to me that there could be a different plan, but the bottom line here is that if you go back to the drawing boards, you're basically denying this permit.
But why do we have to accept the plan just because they proposed it that way? I mean, it doesn't make any sense
Well,
to me at all.
usually a interest is sort of like if someone had brought in a different plan prepared by an engineer, hired by that person, and said, here is a plan, and this makes a lot more sense, it certainly is better than not doing that and saying, planning board, you should tell them to design something different. Usually some self-help is useful in something like this. If you're looking at this, I mean, the site plan has been there. If there is a good alternative, a concept sketch showing just the good alternative would be hugely useful, rather than a general appeal to fairness, which is, you know, you make a point. What is fair? I mean, there's no such thing as perfect fairness.
But I'm depending on you, the board, to protect me as a neighbor, as a resident, and this does not protect me at all.
But that's what you say, and I personally think the fence would protect you in certain respects, and to say it would not protect you at all, that's not how I view it. I think that they are attempting, with this plan, to offer you protections.
Why did they move it from the rear, from the easterly side of the property then? Why did they feel they had to relocate it? Because it was a nuisance, the noise, the odor, everything. And I'm here in support of, obviously, John and Phil, but
But you're
then
saying,
why did they move it away from them? Because they knew it was a nuisance, they knew it was not fair to them, and now this isn't fair to me. They're not being good neighbors to me. And there's no.
so what does the board think of this?
The fence in the back that's 10 feet high, in fact, is
It's a
is at
2-foot
about
berm.
184. It looks like Mr. Rowe and Mr. Joe Henning's house is about at 178. 184 plus 10 feet is 194. If we subtract that from 178, it's about 16 feet, the top of the fence. If it was standing above at the back of your house, the top of the fence would be about 16 feet over your head. The fence on the Lepori side that's 8 feet high, on a 1-foot berm if it is 9 feet, but yet her land is higher. But personally, I agree with the fact that you don't see 10-foot fences. You don't see 10-foot fences anywhere. A 10-foot fence is extreme. They used to call anything above a 6-foot fence a grudge fence. 10 feet is extreme. I wouldn't want a 10-foot fence in my yard. It's like living next to the Berlin Wall.
So what's the answer?
Well, I think one of the things
8-foot
is
fence
that
is sufficient. I mean, I wouldn't want a 10-foot fence there.
What about the 18-wheel trucks
I mean,
that
will
are
you, because
frequenting, then it's not
unless you're
just.
unless you're 8 feet tall, if your eyeball is standing at 6 feet and you're looking over an 8-foot fence, if the truck is right there, you're not going to see it.
A 12-and-a-half-foot,
Just it's
Truck?
geometry. I mean, you'd have to probably.
12.5-foot truck that's 50 feet away, you're not going to see it. Truck-
You know, I'm not trying to convince you of something. You see what I'm saying? If you're standing behind an 8-foot fence, you don't see eyeball across the 8-foot fence. You see at an angle up to the 8.
then why are they proposing an 8-foot for me and a 10-foot? I mean.
I don't know. I have no idea.
And it's really 12 feet high. So again, it's just not fair. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I think you should also consider, and this may or may not impact you, but it's not just the fence that you're going to have there. You're going to have trees on both sides, and those trees will grow taller than 8 feet. It won't be necessarily.
Eventually.
If they
it's
plant a
gonna take years.
fast-growing species, and depending on how high the initial plantings are, but you should remember, it's not just the fence that's
Yeah,
going in that
and that's
far.
what I'm saying, as far as the wind impact, there will be trees. Again, I don't recall how many. Are they every 10 feet, every 15 feet? How far apart are the trees, Maggie, that you're proposing? So,
Can
you
you
know.
plant the trees? You bring the trees in at 10 feet?
We're bringing in at 12.
We're bringing them in, they're proposed,
At 12 foot.
for the Norway spruces on Pam's property, 13 Norway spruces spec'd at 10 to 12 foot, sited where she would like. We understand that Norway spruces might be a little slower growing, so we've decided to bring in the arborvitaes, the deer-resistant arborvitaes, which are much faster growing, and they're spec'd at 10 to 12 feet on our side. So on our side, on both sides, the starting height will be 10 to 12 feet.
so how far apart is that?
Well, the 13 would be, on your side, would sort of be wherever you are, because currently, I never measured, but there's that natural buffer between your barn and our property fence, and our property line, which is probably, how many feet? I don't, 100 feet or so. There's an existing 100-foot buffer. And so wherever there are pockets in that buffer, wherever you like, we'll plant the spruces. And then the arborvitaes are planted.
Or even if there was a sight line that was natural vegetation now, that's deciduous, would be willing to come in and open up the pockets to create an environment that was suitable to accommodate 2, 3, whatever. Ultimately, it's your call where you want them. We'll create a cultural environment for these plants to succeed where you want them.
So basically, I guess my question tonight is, what are the chances of having them relocate this activity?
To what?
Relocate the land care yard?
Well,
mean, obviously,
I
that's
would
my
say
biggest
that
concern.
we need a plan as to where it would be relocated to.
Isn't that simply up to
That's for
the applicants to tell us if they want to move it or they don't want to move it? Why?
I think,
So,
I'm sorry, if I may just comment, I mean, we did spend a fair amount of time a year ago, including significant presentation at town meeting, really based on this plan.
without my input.
And town meeting adopted this bylaw, understanding that the plan as proposed would be like this with sufficient detail added to address the issue of mitigation of impact. So the plan was always to move to the area next to the barn because it is efficient, it is easy in, easy out, it's easiest for, in terms of operation of trucks to pull in and pull out, to offload, to deliver, everything's contained. It's easy to wall it off using the side of the barn and fencing and other plantings along the southerly side. That combination of things makes it easy and, in our opinion, easier to contain, easier to manage, easier to operate with the most benefit in terms of mitigation of impact. Placing another, it's like pushing the edge of the balloon when you start looking at other places. We did look at other, but it doesn't work as efficiently. A, we don't think it effectively buffers. B, as taking advantage of the existence of the wood barn as part of the setup of this area.
But you have the other barn. I mean, you have two barns, so there's one barn or the other barn that you could back it up to. So this is the part of the process I don't understand is, again, just being fair to all the butters.
I think that
I don't know what else to.
I think what we would say is if you bring in a plan showing an efficient layout, we would consider it.
At their discretion, though. I mean, it's right there.
What?
It's at the applicant's discretion, I assume, to do that.
Well, I mean, the applicant, if we specified that they had to put something somewhere else, but we would want a plan showing that it could be done, and that it could be done and be an efficient way to house a business.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the other challenges here is you have a lot of site perimeter on Hillside Street and on Forest Street. This is a historic district. I'm assuming we're not going to want to see it from the street.
And the only way to be 100% fair would be put it right in the middle. That would be the only way to put it fair to
There's
everybody.
already
That's
structures
not
there.
logistically possible.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's going to.
why isn't it logistically possible?
Because they'd have to knock down the whole thing and start all over.
No, they might have to move a parcel. So why should I and my family, for the rest of our lives, have to take the brunt of this? Because, I mean, this is going to be here for a while, I'm going to be here for a while. So what if they have to move the greenhouse?
If it doesn't work for you, bear in mind that when the special permit expires, you are able to come in and say, this just hasn't worked. Just hasn't worked. My life is terrible. I
And
can't.
can that be done annually, like I mentioned last night, instead of 3
It
years?
is
That
possible
scares
that
me.
It is possible the first review would be annual. I'm not sure, and it could be done annually. I'm not sure that the board would do it annually, but it might. But, I mean, it isn't as though you're stuck with it forever if it doesn't work. I mean, there can be additional mitigating measures, and if, in fact, it can be shown that these measures don't give you adequate protection, then who knows? Maybe when the next permit comes around, there will be adjustments of how it will be used. I mean, if you come in with a plan and show a good alternative, we consider it, but they have, this is what they propose, and they are proposing mitigation measures to protect you, and you suggest that you don't think they are going to protect you, but maybe you're wrong. maybe you're not. But if you are wrong, then at the end of the day, you wouldn't be as concerned as you are now about just not knowing whether or not it's going to work as intended.
Well, like I said, getting back to the buffer that they've given the easterly side of the property, I think I deserve the same buffer. The setback of 30 feet, trees on both sides on their property. I think.
And so what are you,
Exhausting.
what sort of a buffer are you proposing?
Well, the same as they're doing in the back.
What is this?
The fence is set 30 feet back, and there's plantings on both sides.
What does this show?
15 feet back.
15 feet.
15 feet.
The plantings are
And this
coming
is-
out
yeah,
40
this is
feet
an
away from the
industrial
fence.
business, so 15 feet, is that a residential setback?
Well, the zoning
What
for
is
a fence is, shall be set back at least 15 feet. So we are
Is that residential or
adhering to
commercial?
the zoning of this.
That's in the current zoning.
In
the
this
zoning.
current zoning. So we are setting it at 15 feet. We chose the 30 feet for them really just from a logistical standpoint. We spec'd it out at the 15 feet, but having it at 15 feet would actually be behind the swale, and then we couldn't monitor what was going on behind the fence. So behind the fence to the stone wall of the Johanning Row property would be challenging for us to monitor. So that's why we chose to bump it in, and the next best place to bump it would be an additional 15. So that's why it sits at the 30-foot. That way we can monitor the swale and the drainage.
Okay, let's get a few more comments on this from Mr. Rowe and Mr. Dunn.
Thank you.
This is actually Matthew Dunn on behalf of Mr. Joanning and Mr. Rowe. There's been talk that there's leasehold interests for that Thayer controls the entire property or the entire site. So with those leasehold interests, you'd think that there's going to be some relocation of activities. For my own curiosity, I'll take this thing out. Is there any reason why the activities that are going to take place in, I don't know what corner you would say this is, here? Okay, couldn't be relocated in this corner here, the corner of Forest and Hillside? You move the nursery back over to where Pam's property is. It seems like a more natural access point to the road, an easier roadway. Or alternatively, where the nursery stock lawn section is here, it could be moved. Then there's a buffer area where it says this is along Hillside Street where it says lawn. Then it's away from all the residents here. And if you're going to put the onus of having to live next to a construction yard or a staging area, wouldn't the more appropriate party to bear the burden of the activities and the use be the applicant? It just seems that would probably be the fairest way to handle something like this. You
What
take
about
care of
Mr.
Pam.
What about the people across the
Mr.
street?
Walter?
You're the applicant, though.
Well,
So,
they're not.
I mean, when,
That's what I'm saying.
I know, you've got a historic.
so what about the single-family
That's
residence
where
here?
it's the problem.
270 Hillside. I mean, you have you're talking about two lots that are the furthest away from abutters, right?
No.
That are the most grown-out areas of the entire place with the least intense uses. I mean, that just, as a matter of equity, it just seems
Well,
like.
interestingly enough,
That's my. If you want to speak, you have to address the chair because we're not going to get into a many-cornered discussion.
It was more, so it's more posed as a question as to, and maybe there's an answer to it, I don't know. But, why is the question is this, why is the use of the intensive uses, the most intensive uses, being put next to Pam's yard when there's an area at the corner of Forest Street and Hillside Street, and then there's also another area that's probably makes the most sense, which is next to the 270 Hillside Street, which is away from all the residents except for the, and again, this whole area is controlled by FAIR, and leased by FAIR.
It is not actually all controlled by FAIR. If you look at
I was looking at the leases that were included in the
Number
application,
two.
so
267 Hillside Street, number 285 Hillside Street, number 292 Forest Street,
so
all of which would be impacted by your suggestion, and
well, let me go through the application. So 217 Hillside, 237 Hillside are leased to Thayer Corporation under a lease dated January 1st, 2009. Properties 270 Hillside.
and
Forest Street,
237 Hillside is right across the street from the Coles.
So 270 Hillside, which is right here.
Okay.
It's right here. I didn't submit this application. I mean, there's a lease.
I understand that.
Right? So there's a lease.
You are suggesting more fair ways to situate
That's-
the workyard.
Okay, so I'll let them answer, but that's my question. I mean, here and here seem like they're not going to impact the abutters. The only people they're going to impact are the applicants, and the applicants want the zoning relief, so isn't it equitable that the applicants should bear the burden of the activity? That's all.
You don't see that Mr. Walter is like directly across from where you stick it?
Then Mr. Walter should present his argument that Ms. Lepore just presented. I mean, she's asking for an equitable
Well,
solution.
no, I
and I'm
just, you
presenting
just said it
with
was
that.
more fair, and I don't kind of agree with your statement, I guess.
No, we've got Mr. Rowe, we've got Mr. Johanning, we're going to do these, but you should, back to the audience.
John Rowe. I wanted to talk about the fence.
No, use the microphone, please.
I want to talk about the fence along the, this I think is the easterly border of the property, and there's a 10-foot fence that's going to be in front of, or on my side of the hemlocks, in the ditch. And so, Mike, when you talked about the elevation of the fence being, 16 feet from my house,
No, 16 feet above your house.
above my house, but the activity at the nursery happens 4 feet above the bottom of the fence, because the fence is in the gully that they dug.
The topo line that shows directly making contact with the fence on the drawing I'm looking, it says
We can
184.
go down there and I'll show you. No.
Does the fence exist there right now?
Fence does not exist, but it stands at the top of before it drops down to the gully.
It follows the 184 topo line, right along.
It's a 10-foot fence that goes to a height of 194.
What's the elevation right here of this yard?
184.
The highest it gets is 190.
Right here. What is the height of this?
184.
Okay, 188. And what is the height of this fence?
194.
The top of the fence. I'm talking the bottom of the fence.
184.
Well,
10.
okay, so what's the difference? What's the difference?
10.
Between here, this is what? What is this?
188.
188, and this is 194?
At the top of the fence.
All right,
I'm sorry.
I don't-
What's happening over here
well-
is completely invisible from what's happening.
we're not talking about invisibility, we're talking about the impact to the residential character of the neighborhood, which is the pollution and the noise and the vibration. This is heavy, heavy equipment. It's a construction yard. It's their application talks about the number of deliveries of materials. All of those materials are hauled out of there. They're brought in, they're loaded up on dump trucks, and they're brought out. The pollution alone from the diesel dump trucks is significant. And no fence is going to stop that. No fence is going to stop the noise of the beeping from the reversal of this equipment. I guess what I don't understand is, why can't this fence be in front of the hemlocks to give it a little bit more elevation? And I believe the zoning ordinance requires the fence, landscaping on both sides of the fence. Putting it behind the hemlocks does not allow for landscaping on Thayer's property to hide the fence from me. If you put it in front of the hemlocks, then your landscaping on the back of the fence is done. It just needs to be landscaped in front of it. And also, I would like the fence to go the entire length of this, from my property line all the way over here and connect with this fence. I'm not sure why, we've talked about that, and we've talked about aesthetics. Is it aesthetics for the nursery? I think that it will block more noise if it's continuous. And there's no sound material on this fence. I'd like to have sound material on this fence. In front of the hemlocks. If there's sound material here, why can't there be sound material here?
Okay.
And, well, is there any reason why the fence can't be in front of the hemlocks?
Well, the zoning states that the fence shall be set 15 feet in from the lot lines.
We're always talking about the law and the zoning. I can do this. Yes, you can do that by right. Like Mrs. King of the ZBA has said, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. We're looking for a better neighbor. I don't think it's unreasonable to put the fence in front of the hemlocks. And I think that really what might be helpful is a site visit. Because if you see where the fence is going, on my side of the hemlocks, then you have the ditch that goes to the stone wall. What kind of landscaping are we going to get on my side of the fence? Maybe the ditch will be removed and the water pumped into the drainage system. I don't know, because we talked about this yesterday. This is where all the water comes. So, can we consider having the fence be continuous?
All these things can be considered. You've made the suggestion. I want to hear from Mr. Oldfield once you've, I mean, we're not going to resolve this, and I'm going to suggest to the board that we have heard a lot of information and that we consider it for our next meeting on April 9th, because I think that being able to mull it over would be a useful thing to do.
Okay, could I just finish up?
Yes.
The applicant is applying to run a high-impact commercial business in a residential zone. And I believe sometimes when I hear the board talk, and certainly when the applicants talk, they're very, very concerned about their business. And I think that a better way to approach this is, let's have some concern about the people who bought their homes in a residential zone, and the zoning ordinance changed that, and the impact it has on the residents. We've talked about how this fence is going to help everybody. No one's going to it will remove the noise and the unsightliness of it. So I think we will come up with a plan, because we can apply the same thought process if all of this high-impact activity was handled here, in this corner, or in this corner. We'll put the fences there. So the people on Hillside won't be able to see this stuff, just as you told us here, that we won't be able to see it. So what's the difference if it's put here on the street? You have easier access to the road. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think these people, proponents of the nursery, they won't mind. They won't mind at all. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Oldfield, do you have something to add?
Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet. Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street. The location was selected because it's the furthest away from all the homes. except for my own.
Okay, well, that was short, as you say. Mr. Johanning, we will hear you if you'd like.
I guess, Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. One of the things, I don't remember with precision, and I don't have my map here, but I was wondering about the utility map. Is the septic system for the entire property identified on the utility map?
Public, no sewer.
No sewer?
No sewer.
Didn't realize that.
Well,
And would that be a utility that should be?
it should be identified, yeah.
Now, another thing, when Maggie and Josh started digging the trench that's supposed to aid in drainage, I called Mr. Prondak and I asked him what the dig safe number was, and he said he didn't have to give me that, but I was wondering, where are the gas lines? Are they identified on the map?
I think they should be.
No gas on the property.
Okay.
Okay.
Then, the last thing I wanted to say was, I remembered something that Pam Lepori said a long time ago at one of, I don't remember which meeting it was, that I thought was very interesting. And she had suggested that perhaps all of these industrial activities should be moved to an industrial area where they could be better accommodated by access, ingress and egress. And she had said to Maggie, wow, it would give you such an opportunity to grow your business. You have such a prestigious, let's say, name. People know you, they want they want you to serve them, but you're constrained on this little property. And so, you know, you should move to a commercial area where